So yesterday I received in the mail the first volume of the Transformers The Manga collection by Viz Media. And I was greatly anticipating this for many, many, many months and talking about this on the podcast already in previous segments because I was just very curious how they were going to tackle something like this. And we've had in the past very Japanese Transformer stuff brought over to America to varying results from to pretty bad. And I was really wondering how Viz Media, a company that in the past has done very well bringing over and maintaining the quality of original Japanese material like Ranma 1/2 and Mermaid and so many other different stuff that I've just they've always been a staple when it comes to porting manga, that I was curious how are they going to handle something that is as confusing as Transformers when it comes from a localization standpoint. I mean, this manga only existed in Japan for 3 decades. This manga has its own wording, its own way that it handles storytelling, its own unique Japanese kind of way. And I was wondering how they were going to do this with a brand that just Hasbro kind of leers over. And I was so worried that it was going to be like what happened with Shout Factory when they localized the Takara stuff, that it was badly done. I still to this day maintain that if you want to watch, Headmasters, Master Force, Victory, and Zone, go find those illegal fan subs that were done by fans, because those are way better than what we got from Shout Factory. It was terribly done, those subtitles, and a lot was lost in that translation. So this makes me very happy. And I spent all of yesterday reading the entire volume and then cross-referencing it with the previous versions. And that being, I own the original Japanese collection of these, and I even own some individual parts of this story in its original singular releases in Comic Bon magazine way back in the day. So it's just something that I'm really excited to bring to you guys, because I'm going to say this right now, this American version is even better than the Japanese version. And that is something I rarely would ever be able to say especially when it comes to manga. And I'll get into why this collection is better than any of the other versions you could get before that. Now, let's just do it from a superficial level. First of all, the original Japanese Transformers manga collection that was done in Japan by Million Publications or Million Publishing, while it got everything in one shot, it was a lot thicker. It's a phone book. It gets all the stories in one shot. A lot of stuff was missing, lacking, or done in lower quality, and I'll get into the specifics. Now, how Viz Media is going to tackle this, and I've said this before on the podcast, is instead of it doing all in one giant phone book, they want to do it in 3 individual volumes, and I'm glad they did do it that way, because it's going to make sense when I explain everything. Number 1, they wanted to do each of them in hardcover. If they would have done it in a large phone book kind of style, a hardcover would suffer from it. Anyone who owns, like, let's say, omnibuses of Marvel and DC and stuff like that, DC, I believe they're called absolutes, sometimes when you have hardcovers, the binding suffers for it because that's so many pages and a lot of weight on it. Number 2, by doing these individually in 3 separate volumes, they're able to kind of isolate the eras of the stories, because it's not just one era of Generation 1, there's multiple eras here from the Japanese side, and they're able to isolate them and give a whole bunch of related extras in the back, and I appreciate that a lot. Also, what is great about this is the letterer who was in charge of doing the English translation and doing the lettering, Brandon Bovia. He even went on to say that when he was doing the text for this, he was obviously comparing it to the original Japanese one, and keep in mind, he wanted to kind of capture that organic kind of text that existed in manga that was back in the day in the early 80s before digital typing. So this is something that he even tried to find a font that matches that. And even when you have the characters, when they do their big, like, anime attacks, like Convoy Punch or whatever, to have a font that even matches that, when it's even more, the kanji is even more organic in calligraphy. So it's very well done. Even the lettering, I know as silly as that sounds, there was even care put into the lettering when transferring this over. And it's when he gets to even character names, you have stuff like the question is, did they want to go with the Japanese names? Did they want to go with Convoy instead of Optimus Prime? Did they want to go with Bumble instead of Bumblebee, or Cliff instead of Cliffjumper, or Meister instead of Wheeljack? Right now, this volume 1, covers pretty much, like, we'll call it the 1984 Season 1, Season 2 story, and a majority of the Season 3 story. As Japan would call it, Super Lifeform Transformers, which was Season 1 and Season 2 for them, and Transformers 2010, which was Season 3 for them. So it covers the manga stories from that era of Optimus Prime to the end of Season 3 with Rodimus. And all of those characters present in this have American counterparts and don't really have, there's nothing in here except one character, and I'll get into him, or maybe two, 1.5, that really have Japanese exclusive kind of terms or names that, when you have stuff like that, sometimes there's interpretations by the fans. I mean, it's like, you look at Minerva's packaging in Japan and it says Manelba, because, Japan with their L's and their B's and all that kind of stuff, and L's and V's and L's and R's and V's and all that kind of stuff. So there's always that kind of conflict. Is it God Jinrai? Is it God Ginrai? Are they even going to go with God Ginrai? Are they going to go with, Apex Armor Optimus Prime? That's something we're going to address when Volume 2 comes out, when they jump into Headmasters, Master Force, and Victory, when we're going to have to see how they're going to tackle the names of very specific characters. Now, as it also partakes to how the extras are done in this, there is a lot of extras that were not in the Japanese version. What they actually did is they took a lot of art from the original Japanese version, and instead of keeping it within the individual, like, how do I explain this? So the entire book of the Japanese version was done in that manga kind of newsprinty kind of paper. And the book is like that cover to cover in the Japanese one. And in between chapters, they would put, insert art and art from TV magazine that was done by Ban Magami, who's the artist of all of the manga in this. And he would do sometimes insert art, which was art based on stories that were going on in episodes of Season 1, 2, and 3 to fill in the gaps in between what's going on with the manga, which was its own continuity and story to begin with. Which I want to address, that a majority of these manga stories are their own standalone stories. They're not something that's part of the G1 cartoon universe. It's kind of like how Marvel had their own G1 continuity for comics, and the cartoon just worked alongside of it. Japan kind of had the same thing, and it really starts to deviate when we get to Master Force and Victory. Now, what's cool about this is the extras that they gave is all the special art is saved for glossy pages on the back. Nice, glossy, high-quality pages that are put on the back of the book, so they're isolated. So if you want to see some of that special art, the Japanese one, you had the flip, go in between the stories and find that specific one, where this, it's all in the back. It's all done in a episode continuity, which is good too, and it's on glossier pages. Another thing that's really good too that they kept is in the original Japanese singular releases of these manga volumes, meaning like each individual story was sold, like, the 22 pages or 25 pages were sold individually in Comic Bon magazine back in the day, and then they're collected in these volumes later. When they did the big Japanese collection, they lost all the color pages. So, and what I mean by that is sometimes Japanese mangas, and people who are like readers of Dragon Ball would know what I'm talking about, sometimes certain volumes or certain chapters, the first 3 or 4 pages are done in color. sometimes limited colors, 5 or 6 colors, sometimes 4 colors, sometimes, full color. But they do that because when these stories were released individually, they didn't really have a feature on the cover of these big phone book kind of magazines. So sometimes you didn't know the colors of characters. And so they would rely on the first couple of pages to feature some main characters in full color. So you could go, oh, that convoy truck there guy, he's red. Oh, that Megatron guy, he's gray. Or like, in the case of Dragon Ball, oh, okay, Goku's hair is black and Bulma's is a purplish green or whatever. So they maintained and kept the color pages for the American release here. The Japanese one didn't even have that. And not only did they maintain the color pages, but they made those color pages gloss, which was like an extra bonus of quality, which I was quite surprised that not only did they maintain it, but they gave them gloss pages. Now, on top of the extra art that I mentioned that was in the Japanese one, the Japanese release, there's even more extra art that was included in this compilation that wasn't in the Japanese one. They pulled art that Ban did from multiple other art books. One of the best examples is the Transformers Visual Works book, which I always feel is one of the best Transformer art books ever made. From the Japanese side of things. They took all of Ban Magami's art from that book, pulled it out, and put it in this collection for people to enjoy. Now, granted, it's not in the biggest quality as the obviously much larger art book of Visual Works, but it still is present in this release and is an extra bonus that's really nice. And then on top of that, there's a whole bunch of little small things that were exclusive to TV Magazine. They were cleaned up, little things in the background of the magazine showing transformations, very inconsequential things that were in individual releases of the magazine back in the day, cleaned up and put in this book for people to see. And it is greatly appreciated. There is so much bonus here that the Japanese version didn't even have that I'm quite shocked that they went about it this way, and I'm very impressed with that. Very, very impressed. Now, let's get into the one name. Like, in terms of translations, like I said, all the characters' names are left the same. Optimus Prime is Optimus Prime, Bumblebee is Bumblebee, Jazz is Jazz. When they handle characters doing special attacks, something that was unique to this manga here, the special attacks are, like for ones like Bumblebee was called Bumble in Japan, and he had a move called the Bumble Kick in the manga. And since, it's pretty much Bumblebee's name anyways, that was maintained in the English version as the Bumble Kick. Doesn't deviate too far away. But then later in the manga, Optimus Prime and Ultra Magnus do like a double punch together. In the Japanese version, it was the Convoy Magnus double punch. In this one, they obviously call it the Optimus Magnus, or I think it was called Prime and Magnus double punch. So there's little changes to that to kind of localize it, but nothing too egregious in my opinion. Now we get to the one unique Japanese character in this volume, and it's that of a character that has been around for years and decades in the fandom, but just, we always have to kind of make the best of finding a pronunciation. There was a character called Gilthor. That's what he was called for years within the fandom. He was an evil Optimus Prime merged with Megatron, clone created by the Quintessons, possessed by Starscream. Weird character, one manga shot thing. I'm pretty sure you've probably seen the art somewhere and you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. Maybe I'll try to post an image in the segment to give people context. Now, this character never really had a proper Romanji being the English pronunciation of it, because it was a one throwaway character. We never really had a figure. It's never been imported. Now we have what I guess Viz is going to go with, and they're going to go with Gilthor instead of Gilthor. They're going with Gilthor because I guess it's the whole emphasis on Thor and a god, and maybe because the Quintessons, originally created the Transformers. They're going with that kind of, so we have Gilthor instead of Gilthor after all these years for this character, and it's probably going to now, it's going to retcon his name from this point on. I'm probably going to still call him Gilthor because I'm just so used to it at this point. But yeah, so finally he gets an official name through this manga. Now, when we go through the chapter readouts, people might be reading through them and going, okay, you have the first chunk of chapters is Fight Super Lifeform Transformers. So they maintain the original Japanese name of the series. I appreciate them doing that. Then you have the story of Super Lifeform Transformers, which that kind of falls into more season 2 kind of stuff, and the Scramble City story. By the way, Scramble City, I'll get into that afterwards. And then they go into the third era, which is the Great Transformers War. Now, people will be confused by that one because when these mangas were originally written, it was called the Great Transformers War, aka what was known as Transformers 2010, aka Season 3. Obviously, you know, with Beast Wars, and now we hear about the Great Transformers War and the Great War, we just think of G1 as a whole. But this manga refers to that specific area as the Great Transformers War, and even the original Japanese version referred to it too. So it's not a translation error. That's just what the Rodimus era was called at that time for the manga. Aside from that, there's nothing really else to really touch on. It's just a perfect translation, done very well with care with people who really know what they're doing. And if there's one thing I was kind of disappointed, but maybe it'll be in a later volume, maybe it'll be in volume 3 because they're really going to have to fill that one out. The original Japanese compilation collection was missing one chapter. And I always was wondering if when this one was going to come out, if it might include. Now, there was one chapter during the Scramble City story that was absent. Now, granted, Ban Magami didn't draw that chapter. He actually just inked it. And a different artist actually drew it. It was Yoshihiro Morito. He did the art for it. And also, it was the story wasn't done by Masumi Kaneda, who did all of the stories in this manga. It was done by Raitai Kobe. And this one-shot manga, which was, again, a Scramble City story, came out in Comic Bon as an extra for the spring 1986 release. It wasn't in here. And I was kind of hoping they'd fit it in there somehow, maybe because it was missing from the Japanese version, maybe because they really want to maintain that this is a Ban Magami Matsude Kaneda collection of these two creators, and they don't want to really put in other creators. Maybe it's a royalty and a trademark issue. Who knows? But it's kind of a shame it isn't there because it was an extra really cool story that had a whole bunch of great art too. But at the same time, it's available online, so it's not really that tough to find if need be to find it in English. But it would have been nice to kind of see it in the collection too. Maybe it will show up later at the end, but it's something I was kind of hoping would be there because even the original Japanese one didn't have it. But this is great stuff. I'm very impressed. I'm very excited about it. Hardcover, looks very nice, very glossy pages in some areas that matter. I can't recommend this enough. I really can't. This isn't me shilling it. I'm shocked that a Japanese product has been ported over and is better than the American product. That is very rare with Transformers. That is so rare. I can't stress that enough. And it has been done with care. Now, I want to see if Viz tackles Volume 2 with Headmasters, Master Force, and Victory with that same care. Now it's going to be a challenge. How are you going to name those characters? Is it going to be Cab? Is it going to be Minerva? Is it going to be Shooter or Go Shooter? Is it going to be Metal Hawk? Are those names going to be maintained? Is there going to be an effort for that? You know, the one thing that I appreciate with this, because it's Viz, nothing was censored. There's some dicey stuff in Volume 1. You know, there's some dicey stuff. I don't want to spoil, but there's some dicey stuff. That stuff was maintained. It wasn't cut out. No panels were cut out. I read through this, and then I had my Japanese version next to me that while I was going through it, I was like, oh, hey, was that scene changed? And I checked the Japanese version. No, it was kept. Everything was kept. Well done. Beautiful. Congratulations, guys. Viz, I am so proud of you guys. You kept doing what you guys have been doing for years, and you did it with a product that could have been very difficult because you sometimes have the overlords of Hasbro kind of controlling how they want their brands to be depicted in their trademarks. So let's see how Volume 2 works out, because now that's going to be the real test. That's going to be the tougher ground, and we're going to see how it goes. But if you guys are interested, check it out. Go on Amazon. Definitely pick it up, and Volumes 2 and 3 will be available, which will cover the rest of the Japanese compilation, and hopefully we'll get some more extras. Now I'm really curious about those extras, because this is going to be very interesting moving forward.